I'm back! I hope you and the YouTube algorithm haven't written me off completely meantime. We are in the middle of summer already, so why not start the 4th season of Tales from Korea with a summer special? For this episode and the next, we are going to read stories of weird and scary things happened on summer holidays. Summer in Korea is pretty muggy and hot, and many people would flock around beaches and valley of streams in its numerous mountains. But out closer in the nature and in unfamiliar surroundings, what awaits for the holidaymakers are not always fun and relaxation. From a tragic accident to a cheap holiday lodging that hides a dark secret to ghosts in the mountain that try to lure you. Here are 4 allegedly true stories from Korea about weird things happened on summer holidays. As always, handpicked, translated and narrated by host, Anthony. Have you heard of being lured or even possessed by waves? Guess you haven't, unless you are a passionate angler. But if you are, you might hear old anglers give a word of warning that waters are anyway full of yin energy, but if you happen to go fishing alone to a place with a particularly strong ghostly energy, the waves would lure you into the water to your demise. In those few months between the end of military service and the new semester in the uni, I decided to have a fun, really enjoy myself. But I'm a good boy, and my choice of activity was fishing. I usually frequented the shores of Busan, and one day a friend joined me to a particularly scenic coast with rock formations. My goal was, of course, fishing, and my friend's was take some photos because that was his hobby. The plan was we would fish over the night, and my friend snatch some shots of sunrise over the sea horizon. But the weather didn't cooperate. Rain poured down in the early hours. We didn't prepare a tent or anything, and we were soaking wet and shivering in no time.
"Oi, boys! What are you doing in the downpour?"
A passerby, a middle-aged man, found us and asked. We thought to take some shots of sunrise," I said.
"In this weather? Come to the temple over there. At least wait till the rain stops. And what's that fishing rod?"
The man saw my equipment.
"Don't be fools. It's no spot to fish at night. Hurry, go to the temple."
We were given a little room at the temple, and I think we slept for an hour or so. When we got up, the rain had stopped, and the sky was filling up with a pale white light. My friend grabbed his camera and ran down to the shore, while I stayed behind, looking down the sea. Rain stopped, but wind remained high. Sea was rough, with waves breaking at the rocky coasts as high as a few meters. I enjoyed the dramatic view, until I found my friend standing in the middle of the rock shelf. He didn't even have his camera or the tripod. Sea and raging waves were much too close there, and indeed he seemed soaked wet and swaying dangerously as high waves broke against the rock time after time. "Oi! What are you doing there? It's dangerous! Come right back!" I shouted. But it seemed my voice was muted out by the noise of waves. I ran down towards the coast. But when I got there, my friend wasn't on the rock shelf anymore. He wasn't as familiar with the sea and coast as I was, and I was convinced he was either fell in the sea or stuck among rocks. I ran along the rock shelf, calling out for him, but I couldn't find any sign of him until I reached the end of the rock. Should I jump into the sea to find him? I should, shouldn't I? I let him go alone, didn't I? I was responsible, I thought. I was already dripping wet, and at the slippery edge of the rock, I made up my mind and was about to jump in. I heard somebody calling my name among the thundering noises of the waves. I looked back, and there was my friend and a monk from the temple. What was he doing back there? My friend seemed too dry to have been standing on the rock shelf a moment ago. What's going on? I crawled back to the shore, slipping and nearly swept away a few times. I saw you standing there all wet. I was looking for you. Have we missed each other or what? I rambled. What are you talking about? I didn't even get near the sea because the waves are too high. I found a spot to take shots back there, my friend said. He then spotted me through the zoom lens, running along the rock shelf like a madman.
The waves must have lured you,
the old monk commented with a bitter smile. I'm still a passionate hobby angler, but I do sometimes feel a bit of fear when I look into the endless waves of the sea. What was it that I saw that morning? Guess I should be just happy that my friend found me in time and I'm still alive. It's the story my sister-in-law would repeat every summer. 25 years ago, sister-in-law was a young woman and was preparing to go to a beach with her friends. Her brother, my future husband, was much younger than her, and sister tried to borrow his new floaty, which it took him days of nagging their mom to buy for him. It was a flat lounger type, and to sister-in-law's mind, it would make a perfect addition to a beach holiday. But little boy that my husband was then would of course not let go of his brand new acquisition. Bribe of sweets and promise for pocket money all failed, and in the end, sneaky sister-in-law just took the floaty early in the morning before her brother woke up. In her gang were two of her besties, A and B, and their boyfriends. For the first night, the 5 of them ended up in 노래방 karaoke bar. In the middle of drinks, laughs, and singing, friend A picked up the mic and started singing 이제 가면 언제 오나 하야디야 out of blue. That's the chorus from an old funeral march song that people sang as they carried out a coffin to the burial plot. At the time, it was often used in a then popular comedy skit. But my sister-in-law could not take it with a good humor and shouted, "Stop it! Why a funeral song when we are having fun? It's a bad luck." Friend A defiantly carried on, but she didn't know beyond the chorus part anyway, and fizzled off soon. Following day, they went out to the beach, and my sister-in-law, of course, carried the all-important floaty with her. Enjoying suntanning on it would make her feel like an actress in a Hollywood film. Though it was a peak season, the beach early in the morning was still rather quiet. Friend B and 2 guys went swimming first, leaving sister and friend A on the beach. But soon they too went into the sea with a floaty. After splashing around a while, sister-in-law hit her toe to a rock and retreated to the beach, while friend A hopped on the floaty. On the shore were friend B and guys back too. They chatted and laughed about sister's achy toe before they went to get some snack, leaving my sister alone. Only then she looked out to the sea and noticed the floaty had moved farther in the sea. And where was A? Sister stood up and narrowed her eyes to focus and found a head appearing on the surface near the floaty and going down again. It was A floundering to get back on the floaty. My sister-in-law was a competent swimmer, but once in panic, all she could do was screaming for help. But there was nobody to help on the empty beach. When sister turned back to the floaty, A was nowhere to be seen anymore. Only when the rest of the gang came back from the snack vendor, the guys jumped into the sea to search for A. But by then, the floaty was already further away and A was nowhere to be found. In the end, they called for Coast Guard. They searched on a boat and A was found, much further away than expected. The guards attempted CPR to revive A, but all my sister could see was A's wide-opened eyes, full of sands in them. Somebody handed her a bottle of water and told her to wash off the sand, which she did with shaky hands. And the eyes revealed were lifeless. The paramedics arrived, but it was in vain. They declared A was dead. My sister and friend B joined the ambulance to the hospital, and all my sister could see were still wide-opened eyes of A. It was so painful to face those eyes that she tried to close them, but they wouldn't. If I didn't bring that floaty with me, if I didn't leave her alone. She could not stop the repeating loop of thoughts. Soon, dead A's parents came. Seeing her daughter still with wide-open eyes, her dad said,
"Why are your eyes still opened? Go peacefully, my poor girl."
He brushed down her eyes, and A's eyes finally closed. My sister-in-law was left traumatized and didn't come out of her room for days on. It was the call from the parents of the dead friend that made her come out again. They asked her to join them to the beach where the tragedy took place. Apparently, they arranged a shamanic ritual for their dead daughter. The shaman claimed the spirit of the dead girl was still stuck in the sea, and said the friends who witnessed her last should be present for the ritual too. Still traumatized sister-in-law doesn't have clear recollections of the ritual until the shaman put some rice in a bowl tied to a string and floated it away to the sea. She fished it out, checked inside, and then floated it away again several times. Something was clearly not going as she expected. In the end, the shaman called my sister-in-law and friend B and told them to float the ball away. Two girls were reluctant and shivering, but did as they were told. When the ball was fished out again, among the rice were a few strands of hair, long and curly, just as A's hair used to be. So the ritual wrapped, and the shaman told my sister and the other friend not to come back to that beach ever again. But she didn't need a warning anyway. For quite some time afterwards, she would often wake up in the middle of the night only to face the wide-open eyes of her dead friend. To this day, she would not even want to look at the beach or sea. In my freshman year, I and 4 friends decided to go on a summer holiday together. But it quickly turned out it was near impossible to find a lodging that met our modest budget in the peak of summer holiday season. More fashionable holiday cottages in popular destinations were well out of our budget, and our internet search led to more obscure and shabby places. And that's how we ended up there, a remote corner of a countryside village. The lodging was literally sitting in the mountain that the landlady had to pick us up from the bus stop. Apparently, we were the only guests there. The landlady would stay around only till the evening and go back to her own place for the night, which was about 20 minutes away. That meant we would have the entire place to ourselves at night. In hindsight, I'd say it was so quiet all around that it almost felt a bit creepy. But at the time, we welcomed it that we were totally free. After all, for me and most other mates, it was the first holiday with no adults to supervise us. The building, a typical farmhouse type of bungalow, was not dirty, but gave off the sense of abandoned place, with unused farm equipment piled at one corner. Rather unusually for that type of house, there was also a staircase that seemed to lead to a basement, whose entrance was blocked with a metal door. I just assumed it should be a storage of a sort. Anyway, we spent most of the day at the valley upstream that was in the walking distance. By the time we had dinner and sat around the TV with the cans of beers, we were all pretty exhausted and ready for an early night. We heard a cat crying from outside. It first started as a normal meowing, but it gradually escalated to shrill screeches. In the quiet of a countryside night, that cat call felt really loud. I and one other girl came out to check, thinking perhaps we could coax it with some treats. But it got quiet as soon as we stepped out. There was no chance we could find it in the pitch dark, so we came back in, but as soon as we settled back down, the cat screeched again. The mate opened the window and shouted, "Shut up!" And it got quiet again. Soon we were all dozing off one by one, and I too was about to fall asleep, when the cat call returned. It carried on sporadically all night long, and we all couldn't sleep soundly. Following morning, the landlady came to check on us, and we complained that some stray cat kept us awake all night. The cat. Well, she's usually quiet, but probably got excited to see new faces, the landlady said. "Oh, so it's the cat you keep?" I asked. "Didn't mosquitoes bother you, by the way? Wild mosquitoes are nastier than in cities, you know," was the landlady's response. Anyway, we spent another day by the valley and the surrounding mountain and came back to the lodging by the evening. While we were preparing dinner, we heard the cat again. We seeked the landlady to ask about the cat, but she seemed to be gone back home already. I and two friends took out the torch and went around in search for the cat, which led us to the staircase to the basement. We were a bit scared, but the cat might be stuck in there and needed help too. So we went down to the metal door. Indeed, that cat call was ringing loud from inside. A friend knocked on the door, and the cat got quiet. I shook the bag of chips that I was holding, thinking it might lure the cat, when suddenly the door moved. It caught on the chain before it got opened, but it still left a small gap. We all gasped and shined the torch to the gap. At first I didn't realize it, but soon recognized a pair of eyes shining in the torchlight that belonged to a woman. My heart dropped. It literally felt like my heart physically dropped. We all three just froze. I think we all didn't understand what was going on. We heard a cat, so... I squeezed out some words to the strange woman. The woman opened her mouth. I thought she was about to respond to something and said, "What?" But she just opened up her mouth wider and came out the cat screech. She must be mad, or not a human. We just all screamed and ran up the stairs. We only later realized we all bruised and sprained our knees and ankles during the desperate flight. It took quite some time before we could calm ourselves down enough to explain what just happened to the other two friends who stayed in the room. We tried to call the landlady, but she didn't answer. We even contemplated about calling the police, but we weren't sure what exactly to explain to them, and if indeed they would believe us. We had no means to leave there right away in the middle of the night. All night long, we all didn't sleep a blink under the duvet. I could not shake off the image of the strange woman's eyes and her wide open mouth. Come to think of it, the landlady should know it all. How odd she talked about the cat and how she evaded my further question about it. As soon as the dawn broke, we ordered a taxi. The driver claimed there was no such lodging registered on his navigation, and we had to explain the way in detail. The driver at first refused to let 5 of us in. He could only take up to 3 passengers at a time, but we pleaded and paid extra and could finally leave the lodging of Nightmare. I gave her one last look at the place as the taxi drove away, and I saw a bag of chips left on the open living room floor. The bag of chips I was holding when we ventured down to the basement and dropped there as we fled. And that bag of chips was somehow back on the floor. I stopped breathing for a second to think how it could have ended up there, but didn't mention anything about it to my already tense friends. I still don't understand who the strange Catwoman was, and the role of the landlady in all that. Back when I was 20, I planned a summer holiday with friends. That was the first trip without my parents, so I was pretty excited. We lived in Busan, so we decided to go to Mount Chiri, which is not far. Not really deep into the mountain, we wanted to have fun, not a hardcore hiking after all, but to a stream at the foot of the mountain, not far from a neighboring village. While we were putting up the tent, a friend volunteered to go further upstream to find the best spot to play. But soon we were alarmed by the noise of the friend shouting. He was arguing with an older guy who looked a local villager. As young guys would, we were quick to back our guy and shouted back at the old guy even before we understood what the argument was about.
"Here's no place to fool around. Find somewhere else,"
the old man repeated himself regardless. We wouldn't back down, of course. Did he own the place? Who decided where we could and could not visit? Who was he to tell us what to do? We shouted at him, and in the end he went away, saying we should at least find a proper lodging rather than camping next to the stream. Young and foolish, we celebrated ourselves for having beaten the old man, and well, fooled around diving and swimming in the stream, barbecuing pork belly, drinking and loudly chatting away. Night set in, and by then we were all a bit drunk. I needed to pee, but didn't want to do it in the earshot of others, so I walked downstream a bit. After my business, I saw some girls chit-chatting on a big flat rock in the middle of the stream. If I managed to invite them to drink with us, I would become a hero in the gang, I thought. Well, Dutch courage is a real thing, so I approached them. "Hello, ladies. I guess you are having a holiday here too?" I said. The four women seemed to get instantly defensive.
"No, we are locals,"
one of them said. "Oh, I see. Well, I'm from Busan with some friends. Happen to be exactly four of us. Could I invite you ladies to have drink with us?"
Well, how are your friends?
"They are all lit, of course." The women seemed to not get what I meant. Considering the old-fashioned clothes they were in, these country girls might not be familiar with such slang terms, perhaps, I thought. But who cares? They were cute. After a few back and forth, they agreed to join. But the water was so cold and they were afraid to get wet, girls said. Again, with a Dutch courage, I gallantly said I would carry them over. So I walked across the water that was about my waist deep, and carried the girls one by one to the shore. And they were surprisingly light. Well, I did lift some weight in preparation for this trip. Maybe I got indeed so strong, I thought. Anyway, I said my gang was on the upstream, but the girls said they'd first make a stop at their tent in the downstream. So I accompanied them downwards, a few steps behind, because they said they wanted to discuss something among themselves. They didn't seem to talk anything much, but carried on walking down.
"Almost there,"
they said, and just giggled among themselves. Maybe I was too drunk, or maybe I was getting slowly sober. But I suddenly felt that these girls were not human. I tried to ignore this growing suspicion. A mad idea. I was too drunk, I told myself, and kept following them until I slipped and fell on the ground. Smell of fresh urine from the ground? It meant I was still in the spot where I peed, even though I thought I walked quite a long way downstream. My mad hunch was right. They were no human. I jumped up and just started running. At least the moon was bright enough to see my way. But despite of my best effort, the giggling of the girls got ever closer, and soon it rang right in my ears. Was this it? Was I going to die? Then I remembered they didn't want to get wet in the cold water. I just jumped into the water without hesitation. The girls waved at me, saying,
"What are you doing? Come out here!"
But they didn't come into the stream and just watched on from the shore. Once the initial panic subsided, I realized how cold the water was. Uncontrollable shiver set in, but I could not go out either. After what felt like forever passed, I heard my friend calling my name. I shouted to help me and save me. The girls seemed to get desperate at that. They now tried to come into the water. Like angry animals, they charged towards the stream on all fours, but they were kept pushed back to the shore like they were buoyant. Nevertheless, they kept trying until my friends came. They disappeared at my friend's sight. My mates shouted where I'd been. They'd been looking for me all around. I explained what happened. But of course, they just laughed at me that I was pissed too much. Soon, they started falling asleep one by one, most of them not even bothering to get into the tent, and just on the sandy shore. Just one friend and I occupied the tent, but I alone could not sleep even in the old zipped-up tent. I don't know how many hours passed, but long enough for me to finally doze off.
It's not him. It's not him. It's not him.
I was woken up, startled, with a low voice from the outside. The girls were back, looking for me. I shook and pinched to wake up the friend sleeping next to me, but it didn't work for his drunken slumber. And then, the sound of a hand brushing over the tent.
Are you asleep? Are you?
This time, it was the voice of one of the friends. I instinctively replied, "No," and after the shrill female laughter, once again in the friend's voice said,
Come out and join us. These girls are humans.
But who'd describe people, humans, in any normal situation? I was assured that wasn't my friend who was saying that. I could hear mixed voices and laughters of men and women having a good time, but they couldn't fool me. I stayed put inside until dawn broke and my friends woke up. To my relief, everybody was fine and didn't seem to have noticed anything about the girl ghosts. All I wanted was to get away as soon as possible. So I hurried them to pack up with a promise to treat them with a proper breakfast in town. And I thought that was it. But while we were waiting for the express bus back home, I noticed a dirty homeless guy staring at me.
Oh, who's that?
He said. My friend said just to ignore that he should be a bit mad, but having just experienced what I had experienced, I could not brush him off. "Do you mean who I am?" I said.
Not you. You are human,
the homeless guy said. That was enough to trigger me, and I kept asking what he meant.
You are in danger,
the homeless said finally. I said I believed what he said, and if there was anything I could do.
Water. I can't. Water. Can't they? Water.
He mumbled on. God must have given him the third eye, but not enough intelligence to put words together. But from what I observed the night before, I somehow understood water should be my defense. By then I was so terrified that I didn't hesitate a second to jump into the public toilet and splash water all over myself, dripping wet. Friends thought I had gone mad, but what did I care? Fortunately, I haven't noticed anything weird afterwards. But I'm not going to any remote mountain or valleys anytime soon. Hi, it's Anthony here, and thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's stories. You might have noticed, but I'm still recording on my portable voice recorder. It will still be a couple of months later that I visit my friend in London and get my microphone back, which I forgot to pack up last spring. But I think the recording quality is still acceptable, so I'll just carry on with a voice recorder for now. If you enjoyed my work, please leave a like and a comment, and please consider subscribing to my channel. My channel is all about paranormal and weird stories straight from Korean web, and along the way, I also try to explain various aspects of Korean tradition and culture. If you are interested in Korea or just a fan of ghost and horror stories, my channel is for you. If you'd support me more directly, I also have a Buy Me a Coffee account. The link's in the description. Buy Me a Coffee supporters enjoy an early access to my new video. Thank you. Next week, we are reading a few more stories from summer holidays. So stay tuned. Until then, stay safe and take care.